Throughout human history, all great spiritual masters and teachers have dealt with the issue of how to deal with human suffering. So there's been so many different ways, systems of thought, um, organizations and techniques of how to employ the tools we have to deal with the suffering that seems inevitable in this life. So in the contemplative traditions I've been studying, we study the actual experience of suffering and the different components of that. And there's an infinite variety of ways we can approach the issue through our thinking, through our feeling, and come to some openness about and acceptance of the various means we have of dealing with suffering, and also dealing with the fact that we don't really know what suffering is. We don't know why we're born into this life. Why do we suffer? So our thinking mind is one really powerful tool. In the Buddhist tradition that I've spent time with, what we come to face is the fact that things aren't what we think they are. Not only are they not what we think they are, but they're free of what we think they are. So the absence of what we think about things is the way they really are. So to put it in pretty simple terms, if we don't really know what thinking is, how can we know that it tells us about how things are? And it's scary because we feel if we really deeply accept that insight that we don't know what thinking is and we don't know what things really are, how can we protect ourselves from the pain of suffering through our thinking? So one way of deeply exploring our actual experience of suffering is to use the thinking tool and, in the relative sense, separate different aspects of a suffering situation and look at the question deeply. What is it that actually suffers? So in contemplative practice, we ask that question deeply. What is it that actually experiences our experience? What is this idea of a separate self? So if we're willing to look at the situation of suffering, maybe take an example of one situation, and it's all right here now, right? So right here and now, we can look at the fact if we're suffering, we can stay with that suffering and explore that situation and maybe look at the component parts of that. If not, just imagine a time when you have been suffering. And let yourself just sink into that feeling and the thoughts about it. So one thing we can pretty well establish is that whenever we're suffering, there always is a rejection of the current situation. There's the thought, I don't like this. I can't accept this. This can't really be happening if the suffering is intense. So, and there's usually, actually always, I think, there's a thought, I don't like this, and then there's a corresponding feeling in the body. For me, it's maybe a constriction in the chest or a pain in the belly. There's some tension there, and we can really learn to explore that relationship between that thought, I don't like this, and that feeling in the body. So what are the components of that actual situation when we're suffering? one way we can look at it, and we all share this experience, is to say, well, there is the actual sensation that we feel. There's the thought, I don't like it. There is the actual objective situation that we imagine to be outside. And then there also is our actual being, our awareness itself, our awareness of being present. It is, so those four elements are right there in the situation that we're facing as our total experience of the suffering. So we can ask the question, what is it that actually suffers? So there's that outside objective situation is just neutral, it's just out there. That doesn't suffer. A thought, I don't like this, any thought doesn't suffer by itself, it's just a thought. We can't say what it actually is, energy impulses, just a mysterious phenomenon that rises and disappears maybe in 3 seconds or so. By itself, what is the substance of that thought? Images of words or letters? We don't know. We don't know what produces the thoughts, really, if we look deeply. And we don't know that they really confine or define or limit the way things really are. So there's that thought, I don't like this, when we're suffering. And then there's the sensation in the chest or in the belly, or maybe we have a headache. What is that sensation actually? What is it actually made of? If we're experiencing sensations, we are experiencing what they're made of. What is a sensation actually made of? So we ask that question with our thinking mind, but sensation itself is free if what we think about it. We can't define, confine, limit, or separate anything just by labeling a sensation with our thinking mind. We can't say what it actually is. So when we're experiencing something that's painful, we're experiencing a deep mystery that's scary, that we fear. But by itself, that sensation is just neutral. It's just there. There's a certain intensity, a density to it that we can experience. And to be open to our actual experience of the sensation, we need to be willing to pay attention to the relationship between that thought, I don't like it, and the sensation itself. So what is the actual experience of the sensation without the story and the thought, I don't like it? And then there is also our actual being, our awareness of being here and now. Both the experience of the thought, I don't like it, and the sensation that gets mixed in with the thought, so we don't like the sensation. Usually we're just concentrated on the sensation that we don't like. But they both arise from this awareness of just being present. And there's an acceptance in our awareness of being present. It's always there. So awareness itself, the here and now, doesn't suffer. Just like the space in this room doesn't suffer, it doesn't resist. Whatever comes by just flows through the space in the room. There's no resistance there. So our awareness itself doesn't suffer. The thought by itself doesn't suffer. Sensations by themselves don't suffer. And the objective situation doesn't suffer. So what is it that actually suffers? When we suffer as human beings, what is it that actually suffers? Well, what actually knows all of our experience, that experiences what actually is experiencing our experience, is witnessing our experience, we call I. So what is that I? That I that doesn't like this suffering, doesn't like this sensation. I don't like the situation, and I don't like the sensations and the thoughts that this situation is seemingly producing and making me suffer. So what is this I? What is the experience of suffering without that I? So we're right in the middle of the situation when we're suffering. Try and find that I that says, I don't like this. I can't accept this. This can't be okay. If we really look, what is actually producing this thought of I? What is the actual own being or entity, I, that is, we imagine is suffering? What is it really? Even in really deep suffering, what is actually here suffering? That I is just not there. It's just not here as a separate being. It's just a thought. That I thought, I don't like this, that is the experience of suffering. Now, it's very difficult to accept that because our conditioning is so deep that painful feelings are bad. It's very difficult to accept. And of course, we can't accept very, very intense, painful feelings if we haven't learned how to accept and be with and investigate this self that imagines suffering, or, that we can say is suffering. The self is suffering in the real world where most people are dealing with this problem. It feels like an absolute truth. Yes, I am suffering. But if we're willing to really look and practice with suffering, that we can stay present to and deal with the different component parts of it and begin to really assimilate into our actual experience, we'll begin to see that suffering is only real as the self that thought imagines us to be. So we remember our actual being. We come back to our actual being. Offer the pain. If we're open to the pain, it can intensify. It'll hurt more, but when we're willing to receive the support of our actual being, the love of our and acceptance of our actual being, it bothers us less. And the care and love for all beings can flow, can just flow. It's not flowing through a container of self, it's just flowing, and we can join that flow.